Okay,
Okay.
live in 5.
Good luck for us. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. Success.
Thank you.
And hello, everybody. Welcome back, Dev Days Europe 2022 to the Brilliant Teams track. I have with me now Tom Ron, engineering lead by leadlinks.md, and she's going to be talking to us about acing the code assignment interview, tips for candidates and interviewers. So I'm really looking forward to this one. Tom, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Stacey, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm sharing my screen. Okay, and we can start. Great. So, okay, hi, everyone. My name is Tom Ron. I'm engineering team lead at LinksMD. My background is in data science and machine learning, and I occasionally blog at my blog at tomron.net. So at Links, we're building the world's #1 medical data science platform, which is collaborative and privacy safe. We bring the healthcare ecosystem a platform that realizes a vision that was long hoped for, the ability to quickly and safely access and research health data, and by this accelerating the development of diagnosis and therapeutic solution. And business is going great, and we need to scale our team and hiring. And hiring is tough for both sides, and it's a two-way process. Both sides want to impress each other. As candidates, we want to find a workplace that would be interesting for us, challenging, have a work-life balance, allow us to grow and compensate well. It's also important. As a company, we want to hire great candidates which are skilled and will fit our organization culture. And the market is crazy. It's hard. The hiring process is also a PR. We want the candidate to know that we are the best place for her. So how to achieve that? There are many approaches, theories, suggestions regarding how to build the hiring process. What it should consist of: technical interview 1, 2, 6, HR talk, take-home assignment, personality test, a graphology test, lunch, in which order, and so on. Honestly, I don't know. For our need, we thought this take-home assignment will provide us inputs and data we need in order to hire a candidate and to make a decision. In the next slide, I'm going to talk slightly about the pros and cons of a test take-home assignment. And then I'm going to dive to a few tips for both sides of the process. Okay, so the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, what are take-home assignments are good for? Especially in current times, take-home assignment imitate a work-life situation where it is you, the code, and Stack Overflow. In contrast to face-to-face interviews, you can take the time and not answer immediately. You can think about your answer and plan and dig into. You can be flexible about the time you're working and the environment, whether you need some music, light, food, and so on. As a candidate, the take-home assignment provide you, I believe, less stressful environment to evaluate the workplace and the tasks you will get when you start. The bad, this is usually called for unbalanced time put into assignment. The candidate puts much more time into the assignment than the potential employer. The potential employer might just reject the candidate without providing a meaningful feedback for her. Additionally, that might create biases against candidates that cannot invest so much time in the process. For example, candidates with families or religious candidates and so on. And the ugly. Some tests are proportionally long, some tests are not relevant for the position, some candidates pay others to make their assignments, and some companies use assignments to get job done without paying. There are definitely ugly aspects of home assignments. If you find yourself in such a situation, maybe it is a sign that, that you don't want to work in such a company or with such colleagues. The discussion about the content pros is not the core of this talk. So I'm not going to dive in deeper into it today. The tips in the next slides are lesson learned from seeing a few thousand of take-home assignments across multiple companies and positions, reading about it, talking about the subject with colleagues and friends, and asking for feedback both from candidates and from companies I applied for as a candidate. The ideas behind all those tips, they might sound trivial, and if it sounds trivial for you, you're in a good place. Great work. Is to shine you over other candidates and to leverage the take-home assignment to show the added value that you bring. For companies, the idea is to make the take-home assignment meaningful, to learn about the company, the candidates, what you hoped to learn, and more about it in a few slides. Additionally, we want the candidate to learn about the position and to leave a good impression, even if she didn't pass it. We'll first go through 5 tips for candidates and then 5 tips for companies. Even if you're sure in which side of this game you are, I encourage you to listen, and hopefully you find it beneficial to hear the other side as well. Small disclaimer, always read what you were asked to do, and if one of my tips collide with what you were asked to do, follow what you were asked to do. Okay, so let's start. First, plan ahead. You got a home assignment, that's usually a great sign that you passed some initial screening or an interview. A good starting point before starting into the implementation is to read the instructions thoroughly. What is the problem you are trying to solve? How it relates to the company business? What are you expected to do? What is the expected output? Is it a code? Is it a design document, PRD, mock architecture? There are many options. How will you be evaluated? This is most of the time it's not written. You need to understand it between the lines. And this you can understand by seeing what is the parts that are emphasized in the assignment, or if you can relate it to the company business. What is the time frame that you have to solve this assignment, and what tools should you use or not use? It is also important to understand your side. How much resources, time, mental, physical, cognitive load you have to invest in such a task. The plan means that you know what is the expected output, you define yourself a scope of work, and you have a mental image of what you are going to tackle and how you're going to do it. That does not mean that there will be no unexpected difficulties. For example, the data is corrupted, the model takes long or act weird, the package you wanted is not running correctly in the runtime environment, and so on. But it will help you frame things and help you understand where you are if you get stuck. Explicit is better than implicit. So you can always count on the Zen of Python to come to the rescue. Okay, so who likes to write readmes? Who likes to read readmes, documentations, doc strings? Okay, so no one likes to write those things. Gladly today we have tools that semi-automate this and make it easier and faster. But you know what's even worse than writing them? Writing a documentation really that no one will read because they are unclear or does not fit the reader's needs. So it can be very annoying to write documentation or document or README, but it is of special importance in this area where there is a lot of async work and we use written communication for it. Specifically in the context of home assignments, where you're not familiar with the reviewers, the background, how they think, or the technologies that they feel comfortable with, documentation becomes a superpower and it can differentiate you from other candidates. In the next 2 slides, I'm going to focus on README files. There are great templates for it online, and I encourage you to find one that you like and feel comfortable with. But I'm not going to suggest a template, but rather cast some light on what is a good README file in the context of home assignment. Okay, so 3 parts: title, introduction, and usage. Title, no second chance to make first impression. This is the first thing the reviewer is going to see when they open your Git repository. Make it indicative and bold. Introduction. What is about, what this task is about. It can be from one sentence to one paragraph and sometimes more if needed. For example, this project trains a classifier to distinguish between dogs and cats. Okay, you can detail how you did it, but at least this sentence. This is a web service which asynchronously reads from a queue and writes it to a database, and so on. The introduction to that, together with the title, will get the reviewers up to speed with your assignment. Usage. What to do with this code? You got the bundle file, what to do with them? For you, it might be crystal clear what to do with it, but maybe the reviewers are not familiar with the choices you made or the tools you are using. In this section, I explain how to install dependencies, for example, pip install, npm install, what is the expected runtime environment, how to compile and run, and so on. What is the expected output, or how do you know that the service is running correctly? If there are arguments, specify them here. But now we want to move from minimal to acing it, right? This is the goal of this talk. So I'm going to talk about two additional parts, architecture and future. Explain how your solution works, which choices you make, what are the trade-offs, and so on. For example, explain why you chose Express.js over Meteor.js, or why you chose Flask over Django, why you favored a specific database, why linear regression is a better fit for the problem than logistic regression, and so on. If there is an architecture, draw it. How data flows, who reads from the queue, who writes to it, which data and message contain, and so on. Be very, very explicit. This will help the reader understand and assess your assignment better and signal your communication skills and technical depth. For me, those two skills are essential to evaluate the candidate's seniority. In the era of remote work, where a big part of our work is done asynchronously using written communication, writing clearly is a priceless skill. When you discuss your choices, the choices you made, the alternatives you consider, it shows that you have a deeper understanding of the technologies that you use. Part of the job of senior candidate is to share their knowledge. And having such a section will indicate to me that as a candidate, you are aware of it. I expect senior candidates to have technology depth in the sense that she saw a few things, she tried many things in the past and is aware of other tools other than the ones she worked with. And she can communicate her thoughts and ideas. It doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with those with her choices, but it's a great ground for discussion, and I can better understand what was important for her and maybe how she understood the assignment. Future. What would you do if you had more time to work on this assignment? How would you scale it? How would you get better results, whether it's better accuracy for classification model or better performance and so on? How would you deploy it? Client might think of it as an own goal, that they will be evaluated by the missing parts. I see it otherwise. I see candidates who are critical concerning their own work, that they know its limits and think about it and how to improve it in the future. They also know that done is better than perfect. They know how to scope and prioritize their work. They have a get things done approach. In startups, such MVPs are often enough. They help to understand the needs and limit, and you don't need to always answer all the business needs as they change over time, as long as you're aware of the limitations. Okay, so number 3, get it. Okay, so since we're in dev days, most likely your take-home exam involves some code. Assuming it is not done in a closed environment such as Codality or the organization-owned environment, a good starting point, as mentioned before, is to understand what you are expected, what is the expected output, code, architecture, so on, and how you are going to hand it over. An excellent way to do it is by creating a private Git repository, pushing your coder and sharing it with your reviewers. This will demonstrate the reviewers that you are familiar with version control tools. That might sound trivial, but especially for recently graduated candidates, that's not. Moreover, it will show your working process and that you keep track of your work. Of course, don't forget to write meaningful commit messages. But last and not least, creating the repository as a private one shows that you respect the potential employer's IP. Even if that's just a test, you still care about it and you act cautiously. Number 4, test me. Write tests. Do I need to add anything else? Okay, I'll add. Writing tests will show your thought process, what you think worth testing, what's not, what extreme cases can you think of, etc. It will also show that you care about the quality of your work and will demonstrate technical and of course will demonstrate technical skills about writing tests. I find the intent here very important, even if the coverage is limited. It is okay to state in the future section we mentioned before that if you had more time, you would have written more tests. Having said that, I would at least write a few tests for the most critical class or function or logic. It's okay to say I prioritize those testing for the given time frame. Of course, you can also always go the extra mile here, and sometimes it is important. For example, for testing, you can scan for vulnerabilities. If you made changes based on such a scan, I would state it in the README file. For example, requirements were scanned by a SNCC or similar, and therefore I upgraded package X from version Y to Y+1 in order to avoid such vulnerability. This adds another tier to your accountability and how you view your position and responsibilities. 5, lint and proofread. Okay, do it just before you hand in the assignment. Okay, so you won't change anything afterwards. So linting your code, make it easier to review and show me that you care about standards and best practices. Proofreading your assignment is essential for turning it to something that is polished and professional. If your assignment involves writing, and as we argued before, it always involves writing, whether it's doctoring, documentation, README, and so on, make sure that there are no spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes. You can use Grammarly or similar tools for that. Okay, please don't neglect the writing. It's really, those days especially, is essential part of your skill set. Again, you can think of it, you can think, okay, no, it's for product managers who write tickets, it's for marketing managers that write PR. I write code that's not text, it's not for me. But as argue, you write documentation, commit message, PR, and so on. So, and working remotely forces all of us to use written communication. Okay. So to sum up, before I move to the company side, plan ahead. Document your work and polish it by proofreading and linting just before you hand it over. Use version control tools and write tests to emphasize the added value that you bring with you. So now for the company's part. Test position fit. So what do I need by this? Know your goals as a company. What you want to achieve by this assignment. What do you want to communicate to the candidate via this assignment? And connect the dots. See, things you can learn from about the candidate from such a task, from take-home assignment. Coding skill, system design skills, how quickly does she learn a new technology? How quickly does she enter to someone else's code? Can she mentor and give feedback? Take-home assignment for the STEM position can differ between different candidates. During the earlier interview process, you learn different things about the candidates. They come from different backgrounds, have different experience, and therefore you might have different concerns about them or different questions you want to answer. That's okay to have different tasks for different positions, okay? As long the goal of the task is to answer your open questions, okay? Of course, this approach has the drawback that you cannot compare between different candidates. However, you don't evaluate them on the same time, but rather sequential. Okay. So when giving the assignment, figure out beforehand what open questions you have about the candidate and how this assignment is going to answer them. What you want the candidate to learn about the company, or what message you want to convey. So as I mentioned earlier, the entire interview process is two ways. You want to check the candidate that the candidate is a good match for you, but you want to also convince the candidate that your company is a good match for her. So in order to get 2 for 1, I try to give tasks that is close to the day-to-day task that the candidate is expected to work on once she joins our company, or at least using the same tech stack. This gives both sides better understanding about the fit. Given an assignment which is a simpler version of the day-to-day task will help the candidates learn about the potential work. By the way, it's completely okay if she decided not to complete the assignment. It is better for both sides to understand it as early as possible in the process. So as I mentioned earlier, what you might want to test, coding skills. Coding skills, that's the obvious thing that you usually want to test. I encourage all of us to cut the clutter and the boilerplate code and focus on the main things. You can achieve it by leaving the candidate only specific functions and classes to implement, or suggest a template that they can use but are not obligated to. But just give it to be very, very focused. It also relates to our next point. Architecture. Okay, so you can describe a simplified version of a problem you recently worked on and ask the candidate how she would approach it, what are the pros and cons of her solution, and so on. Going into someone else's code. This happens to every developer twice a day, at least. Here you can give a working code that has some bug or that can be improved and ask the candidate to improve it. It can be test, documentation, efficiency, everything. Really a lot of space in this area. Another option that is also involves communication and help you also maybe understand if the candidate can mentor or give feedback is to ask the candidate to do a code review. Additional option that I find interesting is to let the candidate solve an issue in an open source project. The candidate can choose the project or the company, but it should be relevant to the set of tools that the company is using or is expected to use. Okay, 2. And maybe the most important one from my perspective about the company's PR, respect the candidate's time. As mentioned earlier, take-home example call for unbalanced time put into the assignment. The candidates usually put much more time to the assignment than the potential employer. Moreover, we're usually biased. When we evaluate the task and how long it will take, we know what we are aiming for, we probably know the tech stack and faced similar problems in the past. Our candidate, on the other hand, does not have the context, is stressed and wants to deliver a perfect assignment. There are several approaches one could take here. Hard limit on time, send it in on X and expect it to be returned on Y hours, where Y is very limited. I would say 3 hours or something similar. Limit the access to the assignment using some kind of platform. Invite the candidate to the office to do it. Of course, this is rough when you're working across the world or in a COVID time. Add some buffer. One common practice here is to ask a colleague to evaluate the assignment. I think this is not always a good thing because it also can introduce some bias because you both have almost the same track of mind and face similar problems and work with similar tools. But just whatever approach you choose to face it, respect the kind of time and be aware of your biases. Also make the assignment MVP. Minimal and most tight to allow you to learn what you wanted to learn about the candidate and cut the waste, as I mentioned earlier. As a candidate, if you figure out the assignment is taking much longer than you expected or you were told to expect, ask for clarification. Maybe you got something wrong, maybe they got something wrong. Okay, it won't be counted against you, and there are always misunderstanding and misevaluations. Suggest a feedback. If the candidate passes, that's easy. You want to say, great work, come join us. But maybe you also want to point out some blind spots or issues you found that this will signal the candidate that this is a place you can learn from and evolve. Offer to give feedback also to candidates that did not pass. It can be via written or via short call. This is a way to explain your decision better, thank the candidate for her time by providing some learning, and make a good PR as an organization that respects its candidates and value learning and growing. If the candidate is not interested, don't push it. You never know where it meets them and what it might trigger. Okay. Know your biases. I mentioned it a few times before and I wanted to be very explicit on it. We are biased, always. And specifically in such a case where we had an idea about the assignment in advance, which tools, architecture, algorithms, and so on to use. If you know your biases, you are able to resist them and be more open and receptive to solutions that are different from what you had in mind. Sticking to your own solution and tools will narrow down your funnel quickly, of course, as long as the solution makes sense. People from different backgrounds and education and cultures might come up with different solutions and focus on different aspects of the problem. Knowing your biases is the first step towards building an organization which is inclusive and diverse. Okay, be available. Candidates would like to ask you questions about the exercise, ask for clarification, make sure they understand the instruction correctly. Be available for them. Sometimes that will mean answering a short email, jumping into a call or for a Zoom session or a phone call. Make them feel they are welcome. That doesn't mean that you have to be available 24/7, of course. It means that within the working hours, you are expected to answer within a reasonable time. Think of it from the candidate's perspective. They cleared their schedule to work on the task, and now they are blocked because and all they can do is to shoot you an email. If the time frame of the assignment is closed, for example, 3 hours, I suggest to actively ask the candidate if she needs anything, or if something is unclear, or even ask her explicitly, what did you understand that you have to do? Once you ask it actively, most likely she would feel more comfortable to ask things she was not certain about earlier, and the chances are higher that the exercise will meet your expectation. I think that it's also part of what you want to communicate as a company or as a team. You are accessible, there is always someone to consult with. Okay, so to conclude, make tests relevant for the position and the candidate. Respect the candidate time and be available for her. Know your biases both when giving the exercise and when evaluating it and giving feedback. Or if I want to shorten it to 4 words, be professional and nice. Okay, so thank you everyone for listening. I hope you find it interesting and insightful. I'll be happy to answer questions, and also feel free to connect me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on.
Hi there. Thanks for that. I have a page full of comments and things that I took from that, as we were saying before we started the session. As both a candidate and as somebody who interviews people, I find this an absolute quagmire to work through and to try and get things out that actually give good insight into what we want to get out of our candidate. It's I think one thing that you said which really triggered me was using interviewees as unpaid labor. And I'm pleased to say that I've never experienced this, but that is wholly unacceptable.
Yes, yes, I support that. I experienced this as a candidate, and I heard of other such cases in the past. So if you suspect this as a candidate, run away. If you do it as a company, that's a very, very, very dark red flag.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. I mean, it's one thing that I can think that the fact that that's unacceptable kind of triggered me to another thing. I don't know what you think of it, so it's kind of a question for you. Tell me if I'm completely wrong, by all means. Um, what do you think to the idea of if there's something that you've already implemented as a company, so you've had a problem that you've solved, and giving that problem as the assignment, so that you can compare it against what you've done. It's a real world problem that people can look at, as long as it's not too big, of course.
So,
Because yeah, being respectful of
so,
time. Is that a reasonable approach? Do you think?
so I mentioned it, yes. Asking usually asking something that is a simplified version, and this is I encourage very much because I believe it gives the candidate better understanding of the day-to-day life and what she's expected to work on. And I think also the company is professional on that, so they can have a discussion that is productive and fruitful for both sides. Um, so yes, I'm very pro this approach.
Yeah, it's I love the idea of getting that insight from people, and also it ensures that the assignment makes sense. I mean, it's the example that you see quite often. Implement this bubble sort or do something. It's like, why would I ever want to do that? I'm a C# programmer, and I'm going to use Link for this because the chances are that it is going to be performant enough for 99.9% of things that I'm ever going to do. Um, Whereas what I do every day is I make secure API. So surely it's a nicer thing would be to ask someone to do something that's actually part of my day-to-day job when you get there.
Yes.
And the other one that really jumped out at me is you were talking about the README. And this is something that I'd never considered before. And it's a huge eye opener because it's such an important part of being a software developer as well. It's the unspoken part about being a software developer.
So I want to say where it meets me. So I often get assignments from candidates where I have no clue what should I do with this code. I can only guess. Um, uh, this one and the other thing, the other common pitfall is that they're trying to read files from their local settings, and then it also does not run. So yes, so experience it many times, and for me as a reviewer, it's very frustrating because it already gets me to a bad mood. But why can't I run it just immediately? I want to evaluate. I want to give feedback to this candidate quickly. I want to move on, but I need to do another iteration, another call to ask her what should I do with this.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, like I said in the talk, no second chance for first impression. I also had a friend during college that said he's the worst person on the first impression. Make the first impression good. And the reviewers might be someone that you never met before, that you were not exposed to in the interview process. Make them feel at home with your code.
Yeah. It's I really love that side of it. And like I say, I think it's something that as software developers we possibly need to, especially for internal projects. It's something that we could probably really improve on as well. Again, looking back over my career, I have my head in shame a little bit.
All of
Um,
us.
I also really like the fact that you mentioned the tests there because I think that also it gives a really nice insight into what the user's thinking when they write their code. Um, and I also think in this day and age, writing code without tests, it's something that we really need to get out of that habit of. It's something that we still do too often. There's still always, we'll write the tests when we have more time. No, we won't because we'll never have
Yeah,
more time.
yes, I can definitely understand like when time is limited, whether the task was limited to 3 hours or whether you're doing several processes in parallel. I can totally understand. But as I mentioned, the intent is also important. So show me you had it in mind, do something that I can understand it, you know how to do it, that you think of it, and I encourage you to prioritize what you think is the most critical one, the most important class, or the logic, and what you find important.
Yeah.
And we can further discuss it why you chose to test this class, or just tell me in the README. That's okay. Um, but that's a
Yeah.
good start.
And I think the same goes for the just getting that insight for the making sure that the spelling, the grammar is correct. There's loads of tools available for that. And I've even noticed in the last few years, even inside of your code, for example, Visual Studio, you can install a spelling checker, and it will
Yeah.
tell you if your variables are spelt correctly, and that
Yes.
can
Yes.
have
Yes. It's
such an
amazing.
impact.
Yes. It's amazing.
Mm.
I would say also, talking about a common pitfall, please also proofread your CVs. I get a handful of unproofread CVs, and my HR person, she always tell me, well, there's the candidates are there is more demand than candidates there, so they can send you CVs that are not proofread. But please proofread. It's really the first impression, even before we see your code.
Yeah, and I would add to that if you can get somebody else to proofread it, because I have an issue. I cannot proofread anything. It's I struggle to read what is on paper. So I always try and get somebody else to read it for me so that they can tell me my mistakes before I make that impression.
And
Um,
specifically, if you're not a native speaker in what you're in the language that you are using. I'm not an English native speaker, and I always use Grammarly and Friends when I need to write an important documentation.
yeah. So I think it's on that side from the candidate side. I really love what I got out of there. From the employer side, we've already discussed, making sure that the assignment you're given makes sense. So don't ask them to implement something they're not going to be doing in real life. One of the things that popped into my mind when you were talking about the different assignments for the different positions. Um, what do you think about the idea of different assignments for different candidates? If I've already spoken to a candidate, you might have an idea from the discussion where they're strong and not strong. Would you use different assignments to really be able to pinpoint the questions that you have?
Yes, yes. So referred to as a test position fit. So, and yes, different candidates come with different experience, different set of skills, different things we learned about them in an earlier interview. Make it relevant for them, make it relevant for the questions you want to answer. Because also mentioned, usually this is not in parallel. There are no 10 candidates that you need to evaluate and choose the best, and you want one test for all. But usually it's sequential. At each time you pass or not pass one of the candidates. So this should serve you.
Yeah. And I think the last 2 points that I've got, they kind of merge together a little bit that I took out of it. The idea of constant communication during the process. So it's don't sit there being are afraid, unsure if you are doing this assignment and it's taking more time than you think it's supposed to do, or there's something you don't quite understand. Actually, encouraging that communication, I think it's for an interviewer to make sure that you let them know that that communication can take place and make people feel comfortable. And it's such an important part of it to ensure that both parties get the best outcome.
Yes, yes. I totally agree with you. And if you feel that the load on you is too much, maybe you can involve other teammates in the
Yeah.
process. And also, I think that the candidate will also benefit from it because they are exposed to another person. They can evaluate better whether it's a good place for them and learn more about the candidate, about the company and the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And the feedback goes with that one as well. It's that's something that I've learned interviewing a few people over the last few years. Of if people want the feedback, if they're open for it, I like what you say about check, because if they don't want the feedback, then don't push it because it's not what they want or need. But I've had a few people that they weren't the right fit, but actually being able to spend time and have that conversation with them about why they weren't the right fit, what if they want to go for this type of thing in the future, could be a really nice thing to concentrate on to get there. I've had such wonderful feedback from candidates that I've unfortunately had to say no to. And I hope if I'm ever in that position that somebody would do the same for me.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree. And also, again, it's also, I say, it's give the message that you value learning, you value feedback, and even that if this candidate is not a good fit for you, they might point out a friend of them. They might say, okay, this is a good organization, even though they didn't accept me, they didn't pass me. You should try there.
Yeah. That is the comments that I had. I don't think we have any questions in the Q&A. Ah, we do have questions. I missed the questions.
Okay, so I will do it out loud. How much as a percentage of the job requirement is preferable to meet? I'm not sure if it's if the question is when should I apply, or how much of the assignment should I solve. I prefer to answer about the assignment because this is the topic of this talk. So of course 120, but I usually try to scope it and say, okay, if you have more time, this is a bonus point. Not always. I think if you understand what is the main point or how it relates to the business problem that this company might have, then focus on that. Okay, it's okay not to answer everything, but focus on something that is meaningful and that you can talk on and discuss about in a further interview. Okay, so the second question is, at which stage of the application process do you think the coding assignment makes sense given the time investment it requires? And do you think it's okay as a candidate to push away coding assignment until one is sure about the company? Okay, so for the first answer, I would say it's not the first step. I would never give a take-home assignment to a candidate I never met or talked with. Further depends on the additional steps you have in the process. If you have one interview and then you have just another interview, then okay, you don't have much choices. If you have an HR at some point, maybe that depends what the HR person prefers, whether he or she prefers to have the HR interview as the last step or earlier in the process. So it depends on your company requirements and constraints. Well, I would say that about the candidate asking to do it later, then I would, if the candidate have any concerns about the company, then I would ask them to raise it, and maybe we can solve it and clarify. So it's okay, but I want it to be explicit to understand what the candidate is concerned about and see if I can solve it. And you suggested that an interview should keep the assignment as MVP. What about the candidate? So should the solution be minimum? How would you stand out amongst the competition? Okay, so I suggested a few strategies that does not make it minimum. But I also think, and that's okay to say, you told me that this exercise should take 3 hours. I invested those 3 hours, I did the main things, and this is what is left to do. And we can discuss it. From my point of view, that's okay.
Yeah, I can totally go with that last one. And I think it's the way that you build that minimum viable product and like you said, the README, the documentation that you put with it, I think that's where you're really going to spot the people that are going to stand out. It's that there's a difference between minimum viable product and something that's just been thrown together quickly. And I think that's an important difference to get inside of your head when you want to make sure that you are that standout person.
I agree. That's very important insight. It's not just working, it's something, it's a product, or it makes sense together.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's we have managed to finish Exactly on time. We have 15 seconds left of the session. That's the three answers. I apologize, everybody, for not getting to the questions sooner. I will learn to use this platform better this afternoon. And I would like to thank Tom again for an amazing, fantastic talk and answering the questions and the chat afterwards. And I will see you all after lunch. Bye-bye
Thank you
for
very
now.
much, everyone. Bye-bye.
And we're done.